All right, today we are diving deep. We're going to hack the brain's code and take a look at 5 incredible drugs that work like precision keys, unlocking balance where it's needed most. It's a fascinating journey into our own chemistry, so let's jump right in. So, to really set the stage here, just think about this. Your brain, it's packed with something like 86 billion neurons. That's billion with a B. They're all firing, connecting, and talking to each other in this unbelievably complex network. Now, in a system that complex, you can imagine things don't always go perfectly, right? Sometimes the signals get too weak or maybe way too strong or they just get out of sync. And when that happens, we start to see these neuropsychiatric conditions emerge. And they present this huge, fascinating puzzle for medicine to solve. So here's what's on deck. We'll kick things off with a really cool way to think about how these drugs work. Then, we'll dive into 5 different conditions: Alzheimer's, depression, epilepsy, Parkinson's, and bipolar disorder. And for each one, we'll look at its own unique lock and the special key designed to fit it. Okay, Section 1, Hacking the Brain's Code. Before we get into specific drugs, we need a way to wrap our heads around all this. And for that, we're going to use a really helpful metaphor, the lock and key model. So here's the big idea. Just imagine that every one of these conditions is like a specific lock in the brain's chemistry. Maybe it's a faulty enzyme or a blocked pathway or some kind of chemical imbalance. Well, the drugs we're talking about are like custom-made keys, and they are designed with incredible precision to fit just one of those locks and fix that one specific problem. Let's see how it actually works. All right, first up, let's talk about Alzheimer's. It's a condition that, as we know, is heartbreakingly defined by the fading of memory. And the core problem here isn't that the signal is broken, it's just that it's gotten way, way too quiet. The specific lock we're dealing with in Alzheimer's is a shortage of this really important chemical messenger called acetylcholine. This stuff is the primary chemical for learning and memory, so when those levels start to drop, the signals just get weaker and weaker, and those crucial connections start to get lost. And this is where the key gets really clever. A drug like donepezil doesn't actually make more of that memory chemical. Nope. Instead, it goes after the enzyme that's responsible for cleaning it up. It's basically like telling the brain's cleanup crew to go on a coffee break. This lets the few messengers that are still around hang out for longer, giving them more time to get their message across and boost that signal. Okay, next up, let's turn to depression. Now, the challenge here is kind of similar. It's about chemical messengers, but this time we're talking about the ones that are in charge of our mood. So the lock in depression is often a lack of 2 really important mood messengers, serotonin and norepinephrine. Specifically, there's not enough of them in the synapse, that tiny little gap between the neurons where all the communication happens. When the levels in that space get too low, it can have a huge impact on our sense of well-being. So, how does the key work here? A drug like venlafaxine is what we call a reuptake inhibitor. Normally, after serotonin and norepinephrine deliver their mood-regulating message, they get sucked right back up by the neuron that sent them out. It's like recycling. Well, this key basically puts up a shield and blocks that reabsorption process. The result? More of those mood messengers are left hanging around in the gap, which makes the whole signal stronger. And this is where the precision of these keys really, really matters. You've got an SNRI like venlafaxine, which is designed to block the reuptake of both serotonin and norepinephrine. But then you have SSRIs like paroxetine, which are even more specific. They are laser-focused on only blocking serotonin reuptake. And you can compare that to much older drugs, the TCAs, which were kind of a blunt instrument. They worked, but they were way less precise and had a lot more side effects. It just goes to show you, pharmacology is all about finding the exact right key for the right lock. All right, let's switch gears to a totally different kind of lock. With epilepsy, the issue isn't a shortage of chemicals. It's the exact opposite. It's an overload of electricity. It's like a sudden, uncontrolled electrical storm raging in the brain. So what exactly is the seizure? Well, at its core, it's just that, a sudden, chaotic burst of electrical activity. A whole bunch of neurons just start firing like crazy, and that storm can spread from one part of the brain to another. The key for this particular lock, a drug called phenytoin, is basically a bouncer at a nightclub. See, for a neuron to fire off an electrical signal, it has to open these tiny little gates called sodium channels. What phenytoin does is it physically goes in and jams those channels shut on any neurons that are getting overexcited. It literally locks the gate, which stops them from firing and prevents that electrical storm from spreading any further. And that's really the whole point. As the source material puts it so well, the goal is preventing the spread of seizure activity in the brain. It's not necessarily about stopping that very first spark, but it's about making sure that spark can't turn into an uncontrollable wildfire. Okay, now for Parkinson's disease. This one is really fascinating because the lock here isn't just about something being missing. It's about a delicate imbalance between two chemicals that are basically playing tug of war. So imagine a chemical seesaw. On one side, you have low levels of dopamine, which is the stuff our brain needs for smooth, controlled movement. But because the dopamine side is low, the other side of the seesaw, the one with acetylcholine, is now relatively way too high. And it's this imbalance, this seesaw being out of whack, that causes those classic symptoms like tremors and rigidity. And that imbalance reveals a really clever treatment strategy. Instead of trying to pile more dopamine onto the low side of the seesaw, which can be tricky, the key here, a drug called benztropine, goes to work on the other side. It actually blocks the activity of all that excess acetylcholine. By pushing down on the high side, it helps restore a bit of balance to the whole system, which in turn helps ease those symptoms. And that brings us to our final case, bipolar disorder. The massive challenge here is, how do you stabilize a brain that can swing between the extreme highs of mania and the crushing lows of depression? Well, the key for this is actually one of the oldest and frankly most effective drugs in all of psychiatry. Yeah, we're talking about lithium. It's one of the simplest elements on the periodic table, and yet, for decades, it has been the absolute gold standard for treating the acute mania that comes with bipolar disorder. It's really less of a simple key and more like a master key that helps stabilize the entire system. So what makes lithium so special is how it works. I mean, unlike all the other drugs we've looked at, it doesn't just hang out on the outside of the neuron. It actually gets inside the cell. And from in there, it works its magic by tweaking how sodium ions move back and forth across the cell membrane. It fundamentally stabilizes the neuron from the inside out, calming that electrical chaos of a manic episode. So let's just take a step back and look at the whole keyring, right? We've unlocked 5 very different problems with 5 incredibly clever keys. We saw keys that boost messengers by telling the cleanup crew to take a hike. We saw keys that block reuptake to keep mood signals firing. We had keys that act like gatekeepers to stop electrical storms, keys that restore balance on a chemical seesaw, and even a master key that stabilizes neurons from the inside out. And that really brings us to a final, pretty amazing thought. We've seen just how precise these keys already are, each one designed for a very specific lock. But as our understanding of those 86 billion neurons gets deeper and more detailed every single day, you have to wonder, right? What other new locks are we about to discover inside the brain's code? And what incredible, even more precise keys will we be able to design in the future?